right, welcome back to the channel, guys. I am so excited to have Alyssa on here today from Compliance Tax, and we are going to talk about all things tax. Now, many of you think that's a boring topic, but unfortunately, as Americans, no matter where you live and work in the world, you need to file your tax return with the IRS. So you're going to need to know about this, and you're not going to want to be delayed, and you're not going to want to put it off for years and years and years. So today we're going to talk about it with Alyssa, because she's American and she lives in Auckland and she has her own tax company, so she understands your situation, and she's here to help. So welcome, Alyssa.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so why don't you just start in with telling us a little bit about your journey to New Zealand from Seattle, and then we can dive into the typical, the typical tax questions that people get, that I get
Yeah,
asked a lot.
yeah. So I moved from Seattle back in 2019. It was, I think around September. So it was right before the pandemic happened. And I was working in tax previously in the US, a little bit of like an international focus, but, really like a lot of pass-through entities, things like that. So when I came to New Zealand, I immediately was recruited by a small boutique firm here.
Oh,
And it was just a huge, yeah, community of expats, like a ton of people really needed help. So it was great for me personally, also as an expat, to kind of learn, what was going on, what were a lot of like common challenges that people were facing doing their taxes. Um, so yeah, it was a really great experience. And then from there, now I work for a Compliance Tax LLC. So we work exclusively with expats, a ton of expats from New Zealand, but also all over the world. And it's been, really great to be able to help people.
oh, that's so cool. So when you went there, was that your intention, or is it just like you were recruited and
It wasn't, yeah, even really my intention. I really just wanted to move somewhere new. I came here on a working holiday visa, so I
Oh,
was
you
like, I'll give
were? Oh
it.
my gosh, I love that.
Isn't
Okay.
that crazy? Yeah, I was like, I'll give it, 3 months, just see how it goes. And then literally, I think it was like my second week here. I was contacted by a recruiter. So there was a huge demand, for expat tax help,
Hmm.
basically.
No, there is. There was nothing. I mean, I called so many places and they only help people like, other Commonwealth countries. They weren't helping, you know, Americans. And so it was definitely a struggle. I'm so glad to have you on here. So you've been there since 2019. How do you like New Zealand? New Zealand, you're in Auckland. So how do you like everything? Like, what's been your experience?
Yeah, it's great. There's always so much difference when you go to a new place, even if they still speak English, like the culture is always a little bit
Yeah.
different. But as far as like scenery, I love doing outdoors things in Seattle. So like hiking, mountains are like gorgeous, loved going to the parks. So it's really nice to have that here as well. Just the scenery is like incredible. The beaches are amazing. So you can't beat that. Yeah.
No, I know. And I'm always saying that the best things in New Zealand are free, right?
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
hiking and the biking and the swimming and the beaches, and they're so yeah, they're like so secluded too. Like you don't see people is what I mean.
Yeah.
And like even if you do, you just move on to the next beach, right? So
Yeah.
it's
It's so
crazy.
true. It was actually really shocking to me when I moved here. You go for a walk and you can go like, half an hour without running into someone else. So
Right.
it's really, yeah, just natural beauty. And there's just so many things to do outside. So it's great for, if you're outdoorsy.
Yeah. So like that's a big difference between living in a place with 5 million people or 300 million people, right? So that's really noticeable. So cool. Okay, let's dive into taxes. So I can't believe how many times I get asked this question, like, "Oh, I've been living here for a couple of years. I didn't know I had to file my tax return." I say that because it's not that you have to necessarily pay taxes to the US. It's because there's what's it called? The agreement.
Foreign tax credit. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so why don't you just dive in and just kind of, if somebody was moving to New Zealand, what do they need to know from the
Yeah.
US?
So this is the part I think where like expat tax, it gets really kind of interesting and there's a lot of nuance. So
Mhm.
most people have heard you can either use a foreign earned income exclusion, which is this year I think is 126,000. So income under that you can exclude it. So you still need to report it on your tax return, but it can be excluded from your income tax. And
And
then
is
the
that
other,
for a single person or is that for a partner?
It's for a single person,
Okay.
yeah. So if you're, married filing jointly, you can each have an exclusion.
Okay,
Uh,
that's what I was wondering because I'm like, oh,
yeah,
I feel like it was more than that. Okay.
yeah, it's for each person.
Mhm.
And then the other option is foreign tax credits. So when you come to New Zealand, they actually have a higher income tax rate here than they do in the US. So there's actually a lot more benefit to be using a foreign tax credit if you're, just salaried with PAYE tax withholding than using the foreign income exclusion. So it's little things like that
Really?
that really makes a difference. Yeah.
Oh, that's very interesting. So you think that you're saying that the income tax is more expensive in New Zealand? Because I feel like it was almost exactly the same, if not a little bit less.
Yeah, the rates are a little bit higher. I think the brackets are adjusted, a little bit differently.
Hmm.
So you do end up paying more tax in New Zealand, but then that means you can usually cancel out all of your US income tax with an applicable tax credit. So you
Right.
usually don't end up having to pay anything. Yeah.
Mm. Oh, interesting. With the tax credit, I don't think I've ever done that with the tax credit, which I need to. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad
And
we're talking.
yeah, part of it too is if you're a taxpayer with children, you can get additional child tax credit if you qualify. But if you use a foreigner and income exclusion, you actually aren't eligible to take the credit. So it's really important to kind of know these,
Right.
little details. Otherwise,
Oh
you
my
can get
gosh. Are you
refundable credit.
kidding me?
Mhm.
Oh, great. I might have to have a look at some.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. No, that's really, really good. So if someone is okay, so they've got their visa and their job and they're moving here, what should they do before they leave the US? Is there anything that they should do?
Yeah, great question. I think honestly, if you just know a little bit about the system you're going into will help a lot. So obviously, when do you become a tax resident in your new place of residence? So if you're moving over there, you already have a job, you already have a visa, it will probably be, either day one or usually 183 days or 3 months. They all have like slightly different rules depending on where you are to determine residency. But that will be step number one is figuring out when you become a tax resident. And then obviously you need to register with your new home, like the IRD in New Zealand,
Yes.
for example. You need to get your new tax number. Another thing to keep in mind is the country you're moving to, like New Zealand, they're on a different tax year than the US. So in
Yes.
the US, yeah, it's calendar year, fiscal year in New Zealand. So things like that you kind of need to just keep in mind. And then, yeah, obviously, if you don't feel comfortable doing your taxes on your own, probably try to find a preparer as soon as possible.
Yeah, you guys, you're gonna need Alyssa, excuse me, Alyssa's help because don't okay, because let me just tell you guys a story. So my first tax, I always did my own taxes, and I'm not an easy tax person because I've always had businesses, and so I just always have a lot of extra forms, if you will, that are endless. And so, but I always wanted to do my own taxes as a business owner because I wanted to be up on tax law because it helps your decisions, right? But so I came to New Zealand and I was doing taxes and, it was different, because I did the foreign exclusion, whatever, and I checked a box wrong. So I got a bill for 20 grand from the
Oh,
IRS. And I was like, uh-oh. And I know I didn't owe it. I know I just did something wrong. So I hired a accountant in the US because I didn't want the IRS to freak out. And so she saw that all I did was check one little box wrong. Like that's all I did. But it took about 18 months to get that fixed. And I kept getting letters like, you owe this money. And it was so stressful. Guys, you do not need this stress. Do not and I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good with forms. I've been doing taxes, but yeah, so that's what I'm saying. Like probably get somebody because it's not easy and you don't want to do it wrong. And then like because you can't like I even try to call the IRS. You can't really do that. And they're
yeah,
jerky. And I'm just trying to do the right thing. And so then you really have to have somebody that understands both laws because you have to, um, you know, I just want to do the right thing. I just wanted to do it right by New Zealand, right by the US,
yeah,
and so you just need someone that knows both of those guys because yeah, because so many accountants in New Zealand won't know, and so many in the US will not know as well. So I finally got someone who knew both yeah, a couple of years ago, and they were like, oh, they've been doing it wrong the whole time.
That's the worst, finding that out.
And I
It's
was like,
honestly,
what?
like, it's really unfortunate. I do see a lot of people come through and, they'll either have notices or they were, just maybe not filing advantageously, like they were using the exclusions instead of the credits. Um, and yeah, it's really hard to fix that because if you're already getting a notice, it's not as just as easy as like amending. Now you have to respond to the notice. You can't just call the IRS up and explain what happened and they'll fix it for you. You have to go through all of the proper channels to get the, penalty removed. So yeah, it's really better to do it right the first time, even if it's just, the first year, if you're a really simple situation, but definitely maybe don't try to do it on your own.
Yeah, yeah, don't. I'm telling you. The IRD, different story. The way
Oh,
that New
yeah, way
Zealand does,
different.
yeah, the way that New Zealand does taxes is like shockingly easy. In fact, you don't
Yeah.
even, it's now automatic if you're just a regular employee, and it's just amazing. And they're just very fun and like, oh, no worries, just get it in. You know,
Yeah.
it's so great. So it's really nice. But yeah, you don't want to get on the bad side of the IRS ever. So get it sorted before you go. Okay, cool. So now people are getting there and, is there anything that you find that you like run into typically with Americans that are living there, maybe tax wise or just investing or finance or business? I know that I was shocked last year when they slapped me with the what did I have to pay? I still had to pay self-employment tax to the US, even
Yeah.
though I was doing everything in New Zealand.
That's a big one. Yeah.
What?
So the self-employment tax is because, well, to back it up, so essentially you have your tax treaties, so the DTAs,
Yes.
and then there's also totalization agreements. So the totalization agreements are for the Social Security for like the self-employment tax. So the US only has totalization agreements with, a handful of countries. New Zealand is not one, unfortunately. So what that means is you still need to pay a self-employment tax if you're self-employed in New Zealand
Mm.
back to the US. So that's a really common one I see because a lot of expats are self-employed, they work remotely, they're digital nomads, or they move to a new country and start their own business. So that will get a lot of people for sure. And it's quite a bit of money.
It is. I was like, what? I'm not even doing it there, you guys. This is like what the US is like one of three countries that even requires, you to file tax returns when you're not even living or working there. So,
Yeah, I think it's too. It's one of the only citizenship-based taxation programs in the world. So
yeah. So, I mean, it's not like I don't want to be a citizen, obviously. And, and then if you do want to renounce your citizenship, they charge you like 3,000
yeah.
a passport to hand in. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's not good. But
Yeah.
okay, cool. So anything else that people should know coming there?
Yeah, another huge one that we see a lot is the Kiwi Savers. So when you come to New Zealand, yeah, if you're employed, your employer will ask if you want to enroll in the Kiwi Saver, which is basically New Zealand's, retirement program. And the issue with Kiwi Savers is a lot of times they fall into the foreign grantor trust territory. 3520s, people may have heard of that, but it's very complicated tax compliance and it's a lot. The penalties on those are pretty high if you also fill the forms out wrong. So I would say, really think about if you need to be or want to be in a Kiwi Saver program with your employer. Um, Also, depending on what the Kiwi Saver is invested in, you may also be subject to something called a PFIC, so Form 8621. Basically, if your Kiwi Saver the underlying investment is a passive foreign investment, it's an additional form you need to file and additional tax you may need to pay. So definitely watch out for those.
So that comes out when they're actually using their Kiwi Saver when they're retired.
When you're putting money into it. So if you're investing into it, there are some exemptions as far as like thresholds and everything, yeah, for investment. But it's generally easier to avoid it, in the first place. Or if you can find a more American friendly retirement in New Zealand, like investment package. So yeah,
Hmm.
definitely another thing to watch out for.
So, okay, so if someone's because we both had KiwiSaver because the employer was giving so much money. And so it was
Yeah.
like, there's no way I'm not doing that. And I didn't know any of this. I
Yeah.
you, I didn't know any of this. So like, so if someone's coming over and they're starting their job and they don't know if they should do the KiwiSaver, like what should they do?
It really depends, I think, on your personal goals as far as,
Mm,
retirement. If you plan on staying in New Zealand long term, if you think you may move back to the US, I think start from there and just think about holistically, like, where do I plan on being in the next, 10, 20 years? And then go from there. So if you're like, I could see myself in New Zealand long term, maybe it does make sense to set up a New Zealand retirement account.
mm.
If you think you'll just be in New Zealand for, short term, probably, it may not fit your needs. So, yeah.
I see. So people are paying extra like passive income tax when they're putting money into the KiwiSaver. Does it affect it when they come out? When it comes out?
Yeah, so the PFICs are pretty complicated. It
I
depends on,
see.
distribution, things like
Mm,
that. So you may not be paying any tax until, yeah, later when you're taking money out. It really
mm,
depends on the fund that you're invested in. But it is compliance every year. So if it is a foreign grantor trust, you have to file the 3520 every year.
mm.
It just all adds up. So I like to look at things, holistically, like, you shouldn't be afraid of doing something in your life because you're worried about having to file extra forms with your
Right,
taxes.
right.
Yeah, but it may not make sense, and if you do get involved in, this type of a fund, it might have long-term tax implications. And if you're just going to be in New Zealand for a short while, maybe that doesn't make sense for you.
So the question then is like if people, have their like Social Security over in the US, like do they still get that? Do you know anything about retirement stuff or
Yeah, we're scratching the farther reaches of my tax brain now. But
yeah.
so essentially, you are entitled to Social Security if you meet all of the other, eligibility requirements. I believe it's like paying into the system for 10 years,
Oh, okay. Yeah,
things
that's
like
true.
that.
The core
Yeah.
requirements. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you can get Social Security, especially that when you're retired. But if you're also eligible for New Zealand, social payments when you retire, you'll need to reduce your US Social Security or vice
yes,
versa.
I did see that, and I remember a couple of years ago that went to Parliament for a bit because people were upset because they've earned the Social Security and
Yeah.
they've lived there their whole, their whole adult life basically, and should collect their pension or their remuneration with New Zealand. Um, yeah, and they were like, I mean, it makes sense. Like, it's there for when you need it, and they're saying that you don't need it. Like, I understand what they're saying. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, they don't give you double. You don't get double.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
Right. But there was talk about that changing. So it hasn't that I know of. So,
Yeah, I'm
um,
not aware of it either,
yeah.
so
So there's another form that I always did, and I'm trying to remember, it's the F bar or something.
yes, FR.
Was that like I had to like show the totals of all my accounts? Is that one? Sorry.
Yes, that's FR.
Yeah.
So, and that'll be probably when you also first move to New Zealand.
Mm,
Once you set up a bank account, they'll ask you when you're setting up your bank account, are you a citizen of any other country? And that's when you say yes, US. But basically what FBAR is, it's not even filed through the IRS, it's filed through FinCEN, so Financial Crimes Enforcement Network.
oh, really?
Yeah, so they have basically like a sharing agreement with other countries. So, when you set up your bank account in New Zealand, your the New Zealand government and the US government, they'll share information about,
Mm,
citizens with foreign bank accounts, essentially is what's going on.
mm.
Um, so the FBAR is just reporting your foreign bank accounts. If you have over 10,000 USD across all of your accounts together, then you'd have to file. But there's no tax associated with filing the form. It's just informational reporting.
Right. But it just felt really weird that I had to like
Yeah,
show all of my bank accounts and all of my investments to the
yeah.
IRS every year.
Yeah, it's a lot of information. I think that's also something really shocking for people when they move abroad. It's you already have all of your US tax stuff and now you have your New Zealand tax and you're giving the same amount of information to both countries at the same time. So it feels like it's quite a lot and it can be like really overwhelming for people. Yeah.
No, it is. It was too much. And
Yeah.
and you just don't wanna do it wrong, and everything's always changing, and I just didn't feel up on it, so but you don't just did you say in the beginning that you help people that just moved to New Zealand or any country from the US, or because 'cause you're just saying expats, so
Yeah, we work a lot with people in New Zealand. I'm based in New Zealand,
mm.
but also people all around the world. So yeah, we get a lot of like, referrals from other clients. They've got friends or family.
Oh, okay,
Um,
nice.
so yeah, people all over the world. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's great, okay. Okay, well, wow, that was really helpful, now I feel like I just want you to look at all my stuff.
Yeah, we'll get you sorted.
Yeah, so that is yeah, so taxes are a big deal, guys. Make sure that um, get in touch with Alyssa with compliance tax when you get to New Zealand and just get that sorted because I just generally what I'm hearing from clients is that they just want someone that knows what they're doing because
Yeah,
moving is just a lot and
yeah,
they're not
it
going to
is.
think about that. And so um yeah, so definitely get in contact with her. I'm going to put her contact information in the description below for you guys, and any questions, they can contact you. Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, thank you so much for sitting down and talking about this and very relevant timing for this as
yeah,
we're kind of getting to that point and I have to start thinking about it too.
yeah. It was
It's always
great to
like,
chat. I know it's always, yeah, it's no one likes to think about taxes, and then now you have to think about doing taxes for two countries. So, um,
yes.
but I'm always happy. I love working with other expats because it's always really interesting to hear everyone's stories and how they ended up where they are. And yeah, it's really rewarding to be able to educate people and just help them feel a little bit more in control of their lives. And yeah, it's
Yeah, and
great.
making those decisions, like even like the Kiwi Savers and the decisions when you're setting up stuff, is just really helpful. So definitely reach out to Alyssa. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks
And
for having
guys, if you are moving to New Zealand, definitely uh start probably with my free webinar on how to move to New Zealand, or just join my community, which is great, which is almost full. I'm gonna close it up for a bit because I just like it to be manageable because it's just me, but, it's just a great resource for anybody that's moving there and all that information, so her information is in there as well, so thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Alyssa.